everyone, welcome back to lesson 100 of Actual English. My name is Jennifer Clyde. Wow, we have come a long way. I can't believe we're already on lesson 100. Now today's topic is, of course, as I reminded you last time, it is ghosts and spirits. It may sound like a very funny topic, but actually there is a lot to talk about. Now we talked about fortune telling and even superstition. Now let's move on to believing in ghosts or even spirits. So do you believe in ghosts? Do you believe in spirits? Some people do, some people don't. Some people believe in reincarnation, where actually if a person dies, they believe that the soul is born again in a different body, and that's what we call reincarnation. Some people, they do bad deeds and they may be born as a cow, for example. If you do good deeds throughout your life, you may be born into, I don't know, something good in your next life. So we'll be talking about all that fun and interesting things. Okay, are you ready? Let's begin with Actual Talk.
Do you believe in life after death? Karma, reincarnation, heaven, hell, or the eternal red of Kurt Vonnegut Jr. Slaughterhouse-Five? Do you believe in ghosts?
Okay, that was a long introduction. But, actually, I do believe in ghosts. Yes,
really?
And I do believe in heaven and hell.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have you ever had any experiences with ghosts?
Well, not personally, but I have had sort of like a tingling.
You had an impersonal experience with a ghost?
Not very close friends with ghosts. Yeah, I have heard of ghost stories. I think I haven't seen a ghost before, but I could sort of sense something in the room, kind of thing. I don't like the dark.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean.
So basically, you're just afraid of the dark. Did you tell ghost stories at summer camp when you were a kid?
We did. Oh my goodness, I was such a scaredy pants. I did not. I was not very good with scary stories, but I stayed there and listened to it. And then when I went home by myself, that's when I got scared. I mean, have you had a ghost experience before?
I'll be very clear. Yes and no.
Oh, well, that's clear. Thanks for that.
Well, actually, I don't believe in ghosts. But at the same time, I lived in this old house, this old Victorian house at the University of Minnesota. And I rented this tiny little room, and they gave me part of the attic as a study area. And I was up there actually listening to Native American flute music all night while working on a paper. And suddenly things started getting a little weird. Again, just a sensation. But first, a picture of me and my sister as little babies just turned around on the table. Physically turned around. And then I'm like, this is kind of weird. And then suddenly I had this incredible impulse to burn the house down.
Oh, goodness.
So I left.
That's
and
good.
It ended right there, and I moved out the next week.
Thank goodness.
Wow, that was an interesting conversation. Did you like today's Actual Talk? Now, what did the two talk about? Today's topic is, once again, ghosts and spirits. So Joanne and Peter were talking about ghosts and spirits, whether they believe in ghosts or spirits, whether they've seen a ghost in the past. So what did Joanne say? She did say, as a matter of fact, that she does believe in ghosts. She's had those shivers before, very strong sense of feeling. And what did Peter say? He told us a very interesting story, an experience of his. So let's find out exactly what he said together in today's Actual Talk. Here we go. Peter begins by asking, do you believe in life after death? Remember, not just to believe, but to believe in something. Now, this means that you believe that something exists. You are believing the existence of something. So, do you believe in life after death? So, what is life after death? Now, if you believe in life after death, you are believing that even if a person dies, their soul lives on, okay? Just because you die, it does not mean that it's over. There's some way of living another life even after death. So that is what he is asking. And then he says karma. Karma is another word for today. Karma is simply put fate. So for example, if you do good things in your life, then if you believe in karma, well, it will bring about results in this life or another, in whatever way. If you do bad things in your life, then it's going to affect you in a negative way somehow. So think of karma as fate, things that will happen no matter what. It's destined to happen. What about reincarnation? I mentioned reincarnation. If you take a look, the word starts with R-E, re, which means again. So reincarnation is where one dies, but the person's soul lives on or is born into another form in the next life. You may be born into a dog or even a cat, even as a person as well. So that is reincarnation, okay? Heaven, hell, do you believe in all this? Okay, he says, do you believe in, once again, believe in ghosts? So what did Joanne say? She says, actually, I do believe in ghosts. Yes, I do believe that ghosts exist. I believe in ghosts. And I do believe, once again, in heaven and hell. So we have a lot of believe in here and here. Okay, believe in. So Peter says, so, okay, have you ever had or have you had any experiences with ghosts? Joanne says, well, I have had sort of, kind of a tingling. A tingling is a sensation, a kind of, I guess, when you're excited sometimes or when you're scared, frightened, you get those prickles or you get those tingles, you get those shivers sometimes, chills. So when you sense something, it's like a sense or feeling of something, you would call it a tingling, okay? So she says, I have had sort of a tingling. Peter says, you had an impersonal experience with a ghost. Impersonal. It can mean indifferent, okay? But it can also mean that it is not a human being, okay? Something that is not human. Thus, perhaps a ghost, okay? Or a supernatural, like a god, for example, okay? She says, yeah, I have heard of ghost stories. Ghost stories. I haven't seen a ghost before, so I have not seen a ghost before, but I could sort of feel something in the room. I don't like the dark, which means she is afraid of the dark. She doesn't like it when the room is very dark. She needs lights on. So Peter says, okay, so basically, generally, you're just afraid of the dark. Be scared of something, be afraid of something, have a fear of something or for something. And then he says, did you tell ghost stories? At summer camp when you were a kid, we can tell ghost stories. And she says, yes, we did. Oh my goodness. And then she says, I was such a scaredy pants. Scaredy pants. Or even scaredy cat. I used to say scaredy cat a lot. Maybe scaredy pants is more Australian, maybe, and scaredy cat is a bit more American. But I definitely said scaredy cat a lot when I was little. So, what is a scaredy cat or scaredy pants? We're not talking about a cat. We're not talking about pants. We're talking about people, a person. So, if you say he is a scaredy cat, he is a scaredy pants, you are saying that he usually gets scared of or he is afraid of things that he doesn't necessarily have to be afraid of. So usually kids, they make a big deal out of nothing, right? They fear things when it's okay. They don't need to be afraid of the dark, but they make a big deal out of it. So if someone is really afraid of something, or if somebody is afraid of a lot of things, you can call that person a scaredy pants or scaredy cat. So she says, she's talking about the past when she was a lot younger. I was not very good with scary stories. Now, be good with something means to deal with something very well, to handle well, but she's saying I was not very good with scary stories, so she's saying that she hated scary stories. She couldn't deal with them very well. She says, I stayed and I listened to it. And then when I went home by myself, that's when I got scared. So when she went home, she started to get scared. And then she asks, have you had a ghost experience before? Now, Peter says, I'll be very clear. Okay, yes and no. This is very interesting, right? You can say yes and no to a question, which means, well, it is kind of yes and kind of a no. It's 50-50. This is what you can say. Well, yes and no. Yes and no. And he explains, actually, I don't believe in ghosts. I do not believe in ghosts. So he does not believe that ghosts exist. But at the same time, I lived in this old house and I rented this tiny little room. So he rented a tiny little room. And they gave me part of the attic as a study area. So we have an idea of what happened. So this was a long time ago. He moved into or rented an old house, a very old house, and he lived in the attic, or they had an attic where he studied, for example. An attic is a room or an area, a place that is just below the roof. It's usually small. Some people live in the attic, but if the attic is small, you may use it as a storage room, for example. Okay. And he says, and I was up there. Remember, it's just beneath the roof of a house. I was up there listening to Native American flute music all night long, all throughout the night, while working on a paper. So he was working on a paper, meaning he was writing a report, perhaps, writing a report or a paper, and suddenly things started getting a little weird, a little strange. Again, he says, just a sensation, meaning just a strange feeling, okay? But first, a picture of me and my sister's little babies. Now he's talking about a picture. A picture just turned around on the table. Wow, that's pretty scary. Isn't it scary? I can't believe this actually happened, but he's saying, you know, suddenly while he was working on a paper, something felt strange. He had a sensation, but a picture of him and his sister's little babies just turned around on the table. It moved by itself. So Joanne says, oh, physically turned around, meaning actually, action-wise. It moved, it turned around. And he says, yeah. And I'm like, meaning I was thinking, this is kind of weird. And then suddenly I had this incredible impulse to. Have an impulse to do something means you have a sudden desire to do something, a very strong desire, a strong wish, but it's very sudden. You feel like you have to do it right then. So he had this incredible, this very huge impulse to burn the house down. Set the house on fire. Burn the house. And then, of course, Joanne says, oh, goodness. But Peter says, so I left. I left, meaning perhaps he left the home. All right, he says, and it ended right there, meaning the story, the situation, the event finished. It ended right there, and I moved out the next week. Thank goodness, Joanne says. So to move out is what? To move out of a place means to get all your things and move to a different place. When you move into a new place, you are actually moving to a new place to perhaps live there. But he moved out, which means he no longer lived in that house, that old house, tiny little house. Okay, well, thanks for sharing, Peter, and thanks to Joanne as well. Everyone, take a listen one more time.
Do you believe in life after death? Karma, reincarnation, heaven, hell, or the eternal red of Kurt Vonnegut Jr. Slaughterhouse-Five? Do you believe in ghosts?
Okay, that was a long introduction. But, actually, I do believe in ghosts. Yes,
really?
And I do believe in heaven and hell.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have you ever had any experiences with ghosts?
Well, not personally, but I have had sort of like a tingling.
You had an impersonal experience with a ghost?
Not very close friends with ghosts. Yeah, I have heard of ghost stories. I think I haven't seen a ghost before, but I could sort of sense something in the room, kind of thing. I don't like the dark.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean.
So basically, you're just afraid of the dark. Did you tell ghost stories at summer camp when you were a kid?
We did. Oh my goodness, I was such a scaredy pants. I did not. I was not very good with scary stories, but I stayed there and listened to it. And then when I went home by myself, that's when I got scared. I mean, have you had a ghost experience before?
I'll be very clear. Yes and no.
Oh, well, that's clear. Thanks for that.
Well, actually, I don't believe in ghosts. But at the same time, I lived in this old house, this old Victorian house at the University of Minnesota. And I rented this tiny little room, and they gave me part of the attic as a study area. And I was up there actually listening to Native American flute music all night while working on a paper. And suddenly things started getting a little weird. Again, just a sensation. But first, a picture of me and my sister as little babies just turned around on the table. Physically turned around. And then I'm like, this is kind of weird. And then suddenly I had this incredible impulse to burn the house down.
Oh, goodness.
So I left.
That's good.
It ended right there, and I moved out the next week.
Thank goodness.
Well, that was spooky. Okay, anyhow, hope you had fun with the actual talk conversation. Let's now move on to actual expressions. Take a look at some vocab words we learned today and some phrases, and move on to some patterns. Let's practice them together. First of all, there was life after death. Peter asked, do you believe in life after death? Meaning, do you believe that a person's soul lives on after death indefinitely? Okay. To live on indefinitely, a person's soul, that is. Afterlife is another way of saying it. Life after death or afterlife. What about karma? Told you? Means fate, in other words, okay? Reincarnation, once again, starts with an R-E, which means again. So reincarnation, it's a long word and the stress goes right there. It basically means that when a person dies, a person's soul moves on or is born into a new body. I gave you examples. A person's soul can be born into a dog, a cat, whatever cow, or even a person, a human being. That's reincarnation. And a tingle is what? You can get a tingle from something. Some other synonyms are shiver, thrill, or even creep. When you're scared or frightened, you can have the creeps as well, or tingles. And impersonal, not, but personal. Stress goes right there, impersonal. Think of it as not being person. If this word is difficult, person is right there, but it's in, meaning not, so it's not a person. So other words are remote, detached, indifferent, or something that is not human, as I explained, such as a god, or even, I guess, something or someone with supernatural powers, for example. Okay, so let's move on to our first pattern. Be good or bad with something or someone. All right. I believe Joanne said that she was not very good with ghost stories, right? Which means that you cannot deal with something very easily. If you say you are not good with something. Let's use it with good. He seems to be good with names and faces. So, to handle well, to control well, to deal well with, or even to remember. In this case, it means to remember. He seems to remember names and faces very well. In other words, you can say, he seems to be good with names and faces. He's good at remembering names and faces. You can also make it into a question. Are you good with children? Meaning what? I mentioned remembering something, but also handling something, dealing with something. So, are you good with children means, do you deal with children well? Okay, I am not very good with children. I try to be good with children, but they seem to cry all the time. So I would say I am not very good with children. Okay. Now, what about this one? I'm terrible with plants. Let's use bad with terrible, okay? Even worse, right? Now, I'm terrible with plants, meaning I kill plants all the time. If you're terrible with something, such as plants, it means, yeah, they don't last very long. You tend to kill them all the time very easily. Here we go. All night. This is easy. It means throughout the night, throughout the entire night, continuously. My sister stayed up all night talking on the phone. My sister stayed up all night talking on the phone. It means that she was talking on the phone through the entire night, continuously without sleeping. What about this one? The baby cried all night. So it means the baby did not stop crying. It cried throughout the entire night. Okay, here we go. Have an impulse to do something. An impulse to do something, I said, it means to have a very strong desire, a strong wish, or a very strong will to do something. And often it's very sudden. Okay. An example is, I had a strong impulse to shout and run. I had a strong impulse to shout and run, meaning suddenly, all of a sudden, for no reason, I really wanted to shout and run, okay? I had a strong impulse to do something. What about this one? He had an impulse to get out of there. It's kind of similar, but for some reason, he felt like he had to leave. So he had an impulse to get out of there. I think sometimes I feel this too. I'm at home and I hear something, a sudden noise coming from somewhere. And I have the strong impulse to just run out of the house because I'm scared. So those things could happen, okay? So that pretty much does it for today's actual expressions. Please practice these patterns more on your own and make them yours.
So an interesting thing about paranormal activity, ghosts, spirits, and what have you. Some scientists were studying hotspots for paranormal activity, and they went there and, they did the usual, like, electronic readings and this and that and the other. And then one scientist was like, hey, let's check out the sound frequencies. And they found that in every one of, the few places they checked out, a graveyard, a haunted office room or something like that, they found that the spots where people sensed paranormal activity were the focus of a low resonant frequency, somewhere around 20 to 60 hertz, which is like as low as you can go on the bass. And they found that this frequency would vibrate the jelly in people's eyes and bend light in weird ways as they perceived it. And also that these low frequencies have an effect on people's nervousness. It makes them more nervous and anxious. So these two things combined made people sense a whole lot of ghosts and paranormal activity.
Wow, another pretty spooky story. Thanks for sharing, Garen. That was today's actual story. How did you like it? Let's check it out together. So, he begins by saying some scientists were studying hotspots. A hotspot could be a dangerous area, a very dangerous place, but it can also be a popular place for something, a well-known place for something. So he's saying some scientists were studying hotspots for paranormal activity. We've got a difficult word here, paranormal. Paranormal activity, okay, we're talking about occurrences, events that are very difficult to explain. Some things cannot be explained, right? So that's what we call a paranormal activity, things that are beyond explanation. So they went there and they did the usual. To do the usual means that they did what they always do, what they normally do, okay? Moving on. One scientist said, let's take a look. Hey, let's check out the sound frequencies, okay? Sound frequency. I'm sure you have heard of frequencies before. Sound frequency, we're talking about audible sounds to the human ear, okay? They can be very, very low, but still audible. We can hear, humans can hear these sounds, and they're sound frequencies. Let's check out the sound frequencies. They found that the spots where people sensed, meaning felt paranormal activity, were the focus of a low frequency. Of what? Of around 20 to 60 hertz. I think we say hertz, but in American English we say hertz. Hertz. So that's 20 to 60 hertz. Pretty low, right? But they say at those spots, those hot spots, okay, that happened to be a low frequency of around 20 to 60 hertz. They found that, they discovered that this frequency of around 20 to 60 hertz would vibrate, would move the jelly in people's eyes. Okay, we all have some sort of, I guess, a film, a very clear film or jelly, you can call it. So this frequency shakes or vibrates the jelly in people's eyes and bends light in weird ways, in very strange ways. So let's take a look. They found that this frequency, they would vibrate the jelly in people's eyes and bend light in weird ways. One last one. So these two things combined made people sense, once again feel, a whole lot of ghosts and paranormal activity. Activities or events that cannot be explained in words. So what is he saying? Some people or scientists said, okay, so we heard there are ghosts in this area, so let's check it out. They went, and what they found was that there was low frequency of around 20 to 60 hertz, and because at that low frequency, people's jellies in their eyes, they vibrate, okay, and a lot of other things happen, so they figured out that it was not a ghost, but it just happens to people at those low frequencies. In other words, people sense things, people imagine things or feel things that are not true. Okay, have a listen one more time.
So an interesting thing about paranormal activity, ghosts, spirits, and what have you. Some scientists were studying hotspots for paranormal activity, and they went there and they did the usual like electronic readings and this and that and the other. And then one scientist was like, hey, let's check out the sound frequencies. And they found that in every one of, well, like the few places they checked out, a graveyard, a haunted office room or something like that, they found that the spots where people sensed paranormal activity were the focus of a low resonant frequency, somewhere around 20 to 60 hertz, which is like as low as you can go on the bass. And they found that this frequency would vibrate the jelly in people's eyes and bend light in weird ways as they perceived it. And also that these low frequencies have an effect on people's nervousness. It makes them more nervous and anxious. So these two things combined made people sense a whole lot of ghosts and paranormal activity.
Today's lesson reminds me of those good old days when I was a little girl. I used to go over to my grandparents' house. My cousins and I would gather around with blankets all over us, and we would tell ghost stories. My cousin would read very scary stories to us. And I remember screaming and shouting and just running around the house because I was so scared. Why not try that today? Tell a scary story and see how many people actually believe in that story. Okay, that is all for today. Next time, we'll be talking about a whole new category. Let's move on to cyberbullying. A lot of parents are very interested in this topic, and we've had this topic posted up as a request, so that's to come next time. In the meantime, come to our homepage, find your way over to www.ebse.co.kr, look for Actual English with Jennifer, and while you're there, leave us a few comments and messages. Thanks for joining me today. Until next time, take care and bye for now.